Now you must go out into your heart as onto a vast plain. Now the immense loneliness begins. The days go numb, the wind sucks the world from your senses like withered leaves. Through the empty branches, the sky remains. It is what you have. These lines by the poet Rainer Maria Rilke hold a truth. And it's one that most of us, I would dare say all of us, know or have known at one point in our life, which is the vast truth of loneliness. And though we may be loath to speak of it, loneliness is a part of human existence. This morning, I am encouraging us to break the taboo and talk about it out loud. And it's very important to do that in these times. Maybe it's your spouse who increasingly wants to do less and less, and who asks you to do less and less with them until the walls and gulfs and then an abyss stretch out where once there were connections. Maybe it's your parents who, after a lifetime of being engaged and vital, suddenly seem unmoored from anchoring routines and relationships, perhaps after good friends have died or retirement, who call more and more, and who seem to have an appetite you cannot quench. Perhaps it is a child, your child. Maybe they're telling you more often that before it was hard, before they felt a little isolated, but now they feel even more different. Maybe it's a friend who says they used to rely on the goodness of people to just not say certain things, but the world in which we're living, it seems as if talking in a certain disparaging way about others is something that's become more emboldened. That people seem more willing to take that risk because it's become more acceptable or maybe even desirable in our society to belittle others as if it's some new way of being American. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's me. No stranger to heartache. Most of us aren't. And yet suddenly finding yourself, lonely and not really knowing what to do with that because it's just not the way that people are supposed to be. You see, loneliness, though it is a truth that's rooted in all of our lives, is actually based in emotional and social disconnection. And it's just not cool. We just don't talk about it. And while I personally can tell you that I am so tired of the adage that in every crisis lies an opportunity. I cannot tell you how tired I am about this. In truth, if we were ever called to look for that opportunity, this is that time. In his TED Talk, psychologist Guy Winch notes how little the average person knows about basic emotional hygiene. He says we favor our body over our mind so much that even the youngest toddler knows that when you cut your finger, you put a Band-Aid on it. But almost no one knows, even people with decades of experience, what to do when you encounter an emotional bruise, an emotional cut. He says what we need is emotional hygiene, and he says it's very important. Particularly, he says, it's important for us to acknowledge the truth and the reality of loneliness. Because loneliness doesn't just make you miserable, it can actually kill you. Loneliness is tied to a lot of physical changes in our body. It can be tied to high blood pressure. It can be tied to suppressed immune systems. It can be tied to depression and anxiety, and on and on. But what it is also tied to is a pattern that can increasingly isolate us from the things we need to give us life and connection and joy and sustain. Now we know that there are many ways to combat loneliness. And some people say that cat hair is known as the lonely person's glitter. For example, I, on the other hand, would like to put a plug in for dogs. In the unexpected turn of events in my life, I now have launched a new spectator sport in my neighborhood. It's watching me walk our 3 dogs at the same time. We have 2 greyhounds, retired racers, and Liam's dog, who is a pit bull Shar-Pei mix. And it all goes really well until someone has to do one of those necessary bodily functions, and then it's just a big mess. But it's a good antidote for loneliness. And before I talk about what causes loneliness, I want to be sure that we talk very strongly today about what does not cause loneliness. Loneliness does not happen because some people are different, or because they are inferior, or because they are socially inept. This is a very important part of our Unitarian and Universalist heritage, which affirm the worth and dignity, as I said at the beginning of our service, of all people. We are not among those religious traditions that say that you can look at someone's life and see their fortune and decide if they are a good or a bad person. That's not what we believe. Ill fortune is not a sign of sinful living, and yet somehow, even though we know this, we can buy into those mythologies, especially when it happens to us, and believe as if things like loneliness and other unwanted emotions are happening to us for some reason. Stuff happens to people. Some of it is random, some of it is systemic, and when it hurts, what we need is for others to be able to walk through it with us, without judgment and without advice. And this is very important in the times in which we're living. Because there are many things that are outside the acceptable parameters of our society that can cause us to be lonely. Grief can do this. Mental health struggles can do this. An identity which leaves us feeling different from others, particularly in these times, can make us feel a deep sense of loneliness. The losses of aging isolate people, as do physical changes. And in this week, many of our transgender kin are subject to a new kind of loneliness because of the federal edict that overturns the rights of transgender children to use the bathroom they want in schools. This re-legislating of discrimination sweeps individuals aside and subjects them to the tide of uncertainty, which for many people often carries in the flotsam and jetsam of deep loneliness. So it is time for us to name it, to talk about it, and to reach out and connect with one another. Loneliness, Guy Winch says, creates a deep psychological wound, one that distorts our perceptions and scrambles our thinking. It makes us believe that those around us care much less than they actually do. It makes us really afraid to reach out, because why risk rejection when you're already struggling? In this way, loneliness can be truly pernicious and deadly. Chronic loneliness, he says, is now thought to be as hard on your health as cigarette smoking. But he says, cigarette packets come with a warning, and loneliness does not. So consider this your warning here today. You know, loneliness is very different from solitude, which is something we all need. Solitude is a sort of nurturing experience. And I was thinking about this morning while I was walking the dogs. And I think the difference is that it's the difference between solitude is to loneliness the way driving a convertible is to driving a car where just all the windows don't roll up. It's just a really different experience, right? Solitude is that choice to explore in one's own company, while loneliness comes from some bigger force and is not of our own making. And all species understand what it's like to be lonely. My puppy let us know this week several times that she was lonely, creating an amazing mixed media creation in my living room to let me know her deep feelings of loneliness that she offered several days this week. But I also heard it in other places this week. I had the chance to hear a courageous testimonial from a high school junior who was part of the delegation who went to meet with Sheriff David Livingston on Thursday. We were there to protest his expansion of the jail and his policies. And she was reading, Giselle was, these remarks that she had written in pencil on college-lined paper, and she broke down crying about every 2 or 3 lines. Because what she was telling him was, she goes to school every day, as many of our children do. But while she's sitting in school, she's wondering whether her mother, who is without documents, will be there when she gets home. She was articulate, she was connected by the community around her, but she still struggled through. And she did not break down again, even when the sheriff dismissed her fears and the fears of others as just normal politics. Living as an undocumented youth, or having beloved family members who are now at risk by the increased aggressive immigration policies of this nation, produces an isolation which separates these children from their classmates. And in that, the seeds of lethal loneliness can grow, and we must be here to make sure that doesn't happen. Sociologist Hannah Arendt understood loneliness through her own experience as a refugee after the Holocaust, and she posited that a particular kind of widespread loneliness and isolation, the kinds that sociologists have been flagging in our nation for years and decades now, can create the conditions in which totalitarianism rises. Democratic societies, she said, are anchored in webs of relationships. When people are dehumanized and treated as other, the way that our sheriff does that when he feels as if it's okay to take payment for the incarceration of human beings to fund his staffing, then the webs of connection which sustain a free society can be torn apart. I think about Arendt when I was sitting in the sheriff's office, and I listened to him explain that making a profit on the incarceration of human lives was just an example of his good business sense. Loneliness. We cannot live without others, as our poem Call to Worship told us. It is a part of life, as the author Thomas Dunn points out. He says, the lonely self will always be with us, an elemental part of our human existence. Yet as long as we continue to exist, we may also come to realize that as alone as we are also not alone. Being aware of this is critical. And I would say that being aware of this as a community and reaching out to others is critical as well. For yes, loneliness is a very common part of the human condition, just like heart disease or a predisposition to diabetes. It can be caused by many things. And in the bully nation in which we are living, it is particularly important that we name it, we see it, and we take steps to ameliorate it. I set the topic for this sermon last August when I wanted to speak about loneliness using that Buddhist idea of what is the sound of one hand clapping. Today, it is a very different, very, very different topic, and it's something that I believe societally we don't talk about enough or accept or think about, and it's pretty easy to overlook if we're not careful. Uncertainty increases our feelings of vulnerability and loneliness and the related dangers that are associated with them. So in a time like this, it is particularly important that we think about ourselves and about those around us, and we reach out and create those webs of support that will keep people safe. It's why we have our grief group here, our elder journey, our caregiving group. It's why we have a new group that our intern minister Jim Lewis is starting to connect those who are feeling most targeted by what's happening in the world. Being together with others who understand your experience is a great solace. And that is what we must think about and do, not only for ourselves, but for those in our community. Loneliness may be epidemic in our nation and among us, and yet this is one epidemic that we can actually address if we take the time to notice it in ourselves, in those around us, in those we love, and to reach out to them. If we are willing to build our emotional literacy and our ability to hear and not try to fix all the time, but just simply to be with those who are feeling particularly disrespected and bullied. We can be a source of resistance to the messages of a nation which has, I fear, elected a bully-in-chief. That we not let these messages funnel down to all those around us, and that we counter them through warm and real connections and our willingness to say that all people have inherent worth and dignity. In this way, we continue to be the water in the waves, reaching out to those all around us who need our comfort and care. Guy Winch points out that 100 years ago, people began practicing good personal physical hygiene, and it really changed public health. It's kind of hard to think about what it was like before that 100 years. But he offers the idea that we can, in fact, begin to also use this time to offer good emotional hygiene. And in doing that, we can continue to build a world of more love and more unity. May we be the ones to make it so.